mid-stage startups in Pakistan. He is also an advisor to the United Nations Development Programme, UNDP, in Pakistan. And of course, there are more to his credit. Previously, Dr. Saif was a cabinet member in the government of Punjab and served as chairman of the Punjab Information Technology Board. His work led to a radical digital transformation of the government in Punjab, and several of his initiatives were replicated throughout the country. I would like to request Honorable Moderator for this session, Dr. Umar Saif, to please come up on stage. I would also like to request our honorable panelists that are present here today to also join him, Mr. Suhail Ahmed and Dr. Hussain Nadeem, and we have 3 guests who will be joining us online. Dr. Hussain will be joining us in a moment. I will now hand over the forum to our prestigious moderator, Dr. Umar Saif, as he introduces our speakers and kickstarts the discussion. Thank you. It's up to you, sir. You can moderate from here as
well. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Thank you everyone for joining us here. I have a long association with IPRI. I'm actually happens to be on the board of IPRI also for several years, but this is my first conference, so congratulations for organizing such a great forum, also bringing all these great speakers, choosing all these wonderful themes, and to be among such accomplished speakers for today. This session is an important one because it sort of touches upon a subject that even non-experts can approach, which is the role of technology in this day and age. What does that mean for especially the emerging world, for countries like Pakistan, and then also in how kind of this increasingly multipolar world would look like vis-a-vis how technology is evolving. So this is an important subject. It used to be for the tech geeks at some stage, but it's very mainstream now. It touches upon politics and strategic communication, but also, you know, how our lives are governed on a daily basis by all the technology that touches us. In this session, we have 5 speakers, and I think at least 2 of them are going to join us remotely, and one of them would be joining us at 5 p.m. I'm looking forward to his comments, which is Professor Singer. He's from Princeton. He's very well known for some of his work on extreme poverty and how technology is touching upon some of that. But that is going to be at 5 p.m. So we've sort of, in many ways, kept the best for the last. And we have 4 other speakers. So what I'm going to do is maybe try and pose a few questions for speakers to come in and kind of elaborate upon them. And the themes that have been given to me by the organizers of the forum is how technology is changing the fundamentals of human existence. So that's very profound. I hope someone can speak about it. But I think technology is changing our fundamental existence. The second big theme is how technology will disrupt the future. I think there's a lot of disruption that we see already. And how it's going to disrupt our lives in the future is an important theme also. And then what does it mean for nationalism, democracy, human rights in this day and age where media is so democratized, anyone can raise their voice, it could be heard across borders, etc. Technology can bring nations together, it could be divisive, it could accentuate polarization and so on within the society also. So what does any of that mean? And then there is, of course, the role of digital technology for morality, ethics, and human conscience, which is also something that technology certainly has implications for beyond kind of just the communication, etc., but also everything that's going on in genetics and stem cells and so on. So technology will have a huge role in how we perceive our own moral values, ethics, religion, etc., going forward. So it will be great if someone could elaborate upon that too. Now, I want to also set this up with some context to the country in which this is being organized, which is Pakistan. This is an interesting country in many ways. Of course, there's a lot of strategic value to Pakistan, but it's also a country of young people who are all equipped with technology. So I was just looking up some facts before coming here, And here's some interesting facts for you in terms of the adoption of technology in this country. Of course, this is the 5th largest country in the world, so the adoption of technology is also at the same scale, but also at a scale that's even bigger than this, because this is a country of young people. The average age of a Pakistani is 22 years, a little over 22 years. Now compare that to the average age of an American, which is 38 years. Compare that to the average age of a Japanese, which is 48 years, right? So this is actually a very young country. You know, average age is, so if you go to any room, including this one, excluding the few gray-haired people in the front row, this is a room of, on average, 22 years old. And therefore, that has implications for just about everything: politics, media, society, ethics, values, everything, you know, is slightly fast-paced, restless, people want change. You know, these are young people. They have their own aspirations and dreams, which can't really be curtailed easily. So that's the country we are in. And in this country, we have 161 million cell phone users, which means that close to 90% of the households now have a cell phone. That's, of course, more than the television sets that we have in Pakistan. So not every household has a television set, but they have a cell phone. So that's interesting, right? So most countries, broadcast medium, or how people at least consumed information, used to be from a one-way channel, which was a television. But in countries like Pakistan, we've leapfrogged that, and every household now almost has a cell phone. And it's not a one-way channel. It is a channel in which you engage, you know, you express, your opinion can be heard, you can respond to what you hear, and you can analyze. So it's sort of the democratized media in Pakistan has arrived even before, for some people, than the broadcast media. So that's also interesting and profound for this country. Now these sort of 161 million cell phone users, out of these 83 million have broadband internet connection, which means that even their mode of consuming education, entertainment, is not as much TV as it is YouTube and Facebook and things of those sorts. So these are broadband internet users. Now 83 million, of course, is a very large number. And just to put that in perspective, when I used to work in the government, I would get sort of executives from large companies come to my office and tell me that, you know, they can create jobs in Pakistan, but it's a small economy. It's not a big country for them in terms of business. So I looked up these facts and would throw them back in their face just to, you know, make sure that Pakistan's importance is perceived that way. Now, just the number of internet users in Pakistan, 83 million, is more than the entire population of France, Italy, and United Kingdom, right? So those are big markets. This is, of course, a much bigger market, right? So 83 million is a very large number. Just the number of internet users in Pakistan is more than the entire population of France, Italy, and United Kingdom. Same for social media users. So this is a country where media has evolved very quickly. There are 45 million Pakistanis on social media. If you count YouTube as social media at 71 million, which is almost all the broadband internet users. But if it's just Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, etc., that's 45 million people. Now 45 million is more than the entire population of Canada. So that's just the number of social media users we have in Pakistan. More so, and economists will talk more about this, I wish this number is spoken about more, but Pakistan also has a very good Gini coefficient. So the disparity, economic disparity that you see, for instance, next door, doesn't actually as much exist in this country. In fact, Pakistan has the third largest middle class anywhere in the world. Just the size of the middle class is more than the entire population of Germany. So Pakistan's middle class size, number of people, is more than the entire population of Germany. So now this is certainly not the kind of country that you associate with a technology revolution, but once you hear these numbers, they blow you away, right? So these are people who have access to technology. They know how to use it. They have the resources to use this technology to buy stuff online, to consume education, entertainment, etc., using these technological devices and access and so on and so forth. Now, given all of this, there are also globally things that are happening that's going to impact us. So now you might be surprised to hear, but about 45% of the world's population doesn't really quite have access to uninterrupted internet. Now one would assume this is something that everyone has access to, but that's not true. But with things like Starlink, which is this low orbit satellite network that Elon Musk is putting together, there will be universal internet access shortly. Shortly is, within 2 to 3 years. So imagine that, the world that is not a first-class citizen in this digital space is all going to be connected in 2-3 years. And no state is going to prevent that because, this is beamed from outside and you just get connected. What does that mean for censorship, for our view of morals and ethics and what's right and what's wrong in a world where everyone's a first-class digital citizen? Right, so these are big changes that are afoot. Of course, there is a huge role of AI. There is the role of AI is so strategic that world leaders have said that whoever conquers this space would be kind of the emerging new power, superpower of the world. There is at this point a lot of politics around rare earth metals and who can churn out more semiconductors than other countries. And there's a big battle going on who's going to control the emerging standard for communications, which is 5G. And this is between, of course, the US and China, which is, whether it's going to be Huawei's and companies like that who are going to produce all the infrastructure for 5G here in this part of the world and there, or it's going to be someone else. And there was a big news yesterday, which some of you may have missed, but was an important one where Apple is going to start sourcing all their semiconductor from the US and not from overseas. So big shift, even at a huge kind of, business cost. That's a big strategic decision. Likewise, the social media, etc., that we use is great for entertainment, but also has a lot of our data. And who has access to that data, of course, has unprecedented power. And therefore, when TikTok became bigger than Facebook in the US, it had to be turned into a US corporation. So on the TikTok board, Microsoft has a position now. They sit on that board and decide who gets to control that data. Right? So these are big emerging changes in the world, and it's not oil and gas anymore, it's technology and data. And in this space, whoever conquers this would be the entity to look forward to in this emerging world. So with this context, it is my absolute privilege to invite our first speaker to speak on this. Our first speaker is Anna Choi. And I want to make sure that I get the introduction right. And I have a longer bio of Anna Choi than the one that's been given to me. Anna Choi so Dr. Anna Choi has a PhD in human resource management. She has a background in journalism. She worked in journalism 15 years. And currently, she's the director and senior research fellow at the Future Consensus Institute, which is formulating policy, with a vis-a-vis technology and digital transformation. And because of her journalism background and her experience in journalism, she has seen sort of this transition from traditional print to broadcast to now kind of digital interactive journalism, so she'll be able to speak about that. She's also a co-author of 2 books on this subject. So with this, I want to invite Dr. Choi. Dr. Choi, you have 10 minutes for your opening remarks. We'll then have about 10 minutes for a conversation. Some of the people in the audience may be able to ask questions. I can pose a question or two, and then we move to the next speaker.
Hello? Can you see me? Okay. Thank you very much. It's a great honor for me to join you, and thank you for having me today. And in the beginning, you mentioned the population of Pakistan, and I would like to mention that in 1994 in Korea, my institute is based in Seoul, Korea. And in 1994, our median age of our population was 29. And now we are over 40. I guess it's going to be 44 or 45. And with the help of the technology development, the aging population is getting older and older every year. So in 10 years, we are expecting that 1/3 of our population is going to be over 60. So it's a great energy in Pakistan that if you have a lot of young people. And actually yesterday, I met some people in the blockchain industry, and they're mostly in their 20s and 30s. And we talk about those a digital divide. As I told you that we have a lot of the population, the old people, and the problem is the digital divide is one of the biggest issue in Korea. And one guy, he is in his 20s, and he's in the cryptocurrency industry. He's doing a business in crypto, and he compared that the people who has like a digital competencies and who doesn't have that competency can be compared like Homo sapiens and like Neanderthals. So the gap is so big, and one of the biggest issue in Korea is how we are going to solve that gap between the people with digital competency and the people who don't have it. And before starting it, I'm going to share the slides I have. Sorry. Yes. Can you see it clearly? Yes, and actually we have gone, the humans have a long, long history, and I would like to start from this man, Adam Smith. And it actually is a very famous description of his pin factory. And I'll jump this very short. This pin factory is the division of labors, and then it heralds the advent of the big scale of industrialization, the state and society. And then we have this man. He is the father of scientific management, of Frederick Taylor. And he described it like that the man has been the first in the past, but in the future the system must be first. And what he focused was efficiency. And our human industry has developed into how we are going to maximize the prosperity and efficiency. So even though we have a focus on the efficiency, it was like a control and surveillance becomes so important, and everything becomes so centralized and top-down communication. And actually we lost the humanity. And this is the famous scene from the movie, The Modern Times, from Charlie Chaplin. And it describes that how human become a part of the big system. And then we gain a lot of prosperity. That's true economically. But where are we now? We see the polarization, the gap and polarization of economically, politically, and the war and the climate change, and the ecosystem is disrupting. And in this system, are we able to tackle these challenges? And I mentioned about the technology in the beginning, and I believe this technology change associated with the risk, but it also has the opportunities to overcome the challenges we are facing. And in the development of human history, I would like to focus the three elements that change our lives. It's communication and mobility and production. And as Gutenberg's printing system, his revolution has changed how we distribute our knowledges. I now focus on blockchain, which is the new way of record system. Blockchain is not only related to crypto. It is the record of transaction, and it empower the individual and give the individuals the self-sovereignty. And it is the biggest, I believe this can make a big change in our social governance, as because of the blockchain, the trust cost has decreased dramatically. So the access to this record system the individuals can access to this record system above the almost like a nation, the national level. And this is going to change a lot. And then I would like to mention about the mobility, like the trains and the plane give humans a lot of ability to meet and move faster. And then with the virtual reality and metaverse, it is like breaking the limits of human, of like the limits of like time and space, and this is going to make a big difference. It's going to like give a lot of power for people to communicate and like make a collective knowledge together. And the third is like the production and the artificial intelligence. It's over all the technological change. And then I'll move to, sorry. So in the beginning, I show you a very hierarchical, like the organization. And nowadays we see like the possibility of like a decentralized and autonomous organization. And actually, like I checked the DeepDAO last month, and then it was like last year, the DAO, the decentralized autonomous organizations, the number of them are like only like several hundred, and only after 1 year, it has increased to like more than like 25,000 like numbers of the organizations, and I believe it's gonna like increase in a dramatic speed. And this changes the way we like the people work, people organize, and the way of the government, how the power works. And it's like a hierarchy, the share of power. And I want to say this kind of organizational change can help us to make like a better coordination in overcoming and tackling the challenges we are facing. Because this organization is more agile, it can like the people have like the higher possibility of participation, so they can they can adjust to the changes and the issues quickly, and they can gather and distribute the issues very quickly, and it's scalable because it is based on the cryptocurrency and token. So the people can like the issues can be immediately get access to a global stage. And for instance, like the climate, like a carbon carbon credits can be like a trend, can be used as like a token, and it can be like sold in using the DAO organization. And it is more transparent. People, it includes all stakeholders, so it doesn't marginalize it used to, in a hierarchical system, it marginalized many people. It only gives power to the few who are like, making the decision. But it is becoming, the process of making decision is more transparent, so people can like better participate and make a collective action to solve the problems. So in this sense, the problem of the risk of this like the new organization and new change of the government is like it can be make people, it empowers the individual, so it can spread, and as there's a good side of that, but on the other hand, people will be able to gather only who share same values and ethics. And in this sense, that the ethics and values are becoming more important. And as I mentioned in the middle, that the metaverse is changing. So in the past, the geographical accessibility is important, but more and more the people who share the same, the ethics, the common values will gather together, and it can help to solve the problems, but it also have a risk of making people make them like a fragmentation. So as you heard about like the echo chamber or filter bubbling, the people are already like gathering with the same like-minded, and I think that is one of the issues that we have to tackle. And in the beginning, I mentioned the digital divide. How are we going to include the people who doesn't have those competencies, and how are we going to make an inclusion of diverse people around the world, and how are we going to make people will commit to their community and to be altruistic without going against the nature, and contribute to the community. And thank you.
We can probably take a couple of questions from the audience because we may not have time at the end of the session because of Professor Singh's talk at the end. So if you have any questions, feel free to pose them. I can moderate. Please do introduce yourself also.
Assalamualaikum, sir. I am Zohaib Babar from Qaid University. Sir, my question is, weapons like electromagnetic pulse or a cyber attack can be a serious threat for AI-based technology or systems or not? Thank you.
Wow, I don't know whether Dr. Choi would be the best expert to answer that, but we could try. Dr. Choi, would you like to answer that?
Could you ask me one more time? I couldn't hear clearly your question. I'm sorry, but could you ask me one more time?
We can maybe, ask these questions to you. Any more questions? There's a lady in the second row.
I am Professor Amna. I just have one question, that diversification without equitable and just distribution of resources is bound to lead to fragmentation. How we can address that? Thank you.
Dr. Choi?
Yes, it's a very good question, and actually that is one of the biggest issues we are facing. And I told you in the middle of my presentation that we can, the decentralized organization is more agile, and it is able to people gather who has a same issue and similar to overcome some the people who are committed to solve that the problem. It is more, it can easily make people have a collective action. However, as I told you, the people are gathering only with the same minded, and that is I don't have the answer, and that is one of the biggest issue we have to solve together. And one of the way is, I believe because people are addressing that risk and issue, it also can be solved through the people who are aware of that question and who are eager to solve that question. And as I told you, these kind of organization is more agile, and it can make it it can easily make it as a global issue, gather people to work together. And with the help of AI, we have those predictable power with the help of a big data. And I believe the people will make maybe kind of that kind of organization or the DAOs to solve that issue in the future, because that is one of the biggest issues we have to tackle.
I think I can speak Dr. Wei.
Very good, sir.
Yeah. Just to ask you, Dr. Sir, you mentioned about 5G technology.
This is for Dr. Choi.
As a society, we are ready to stand up to 5G in terms of its disruptive capabilities.
Well, so there's nothing wrong with 5G, except the minor inconvenience that's in a spectrum which interferes with aviation systems. So in a country like US or in other countries where there's a large deployment of telecommunication infrastructure close to airports, the actual disruption there, the physical disruption of how it's going to pan out is quite substantial. Therefore, I think there'll be going to be a pushback around that. But in countries like Pakistan, I think we're going to leapfrog a lot of the countries in terms of 5G deployment. 5G terminals are going to become less and less expensive, which is the phones that we use. Most phones now come equipped with a 5G chip. The telecommunication network is such that 5G can be easily overlaid on top of it. The spectrum governance in Pakistan is very good. We very quickly moved from 3G to 4G. So I actually don't see many challenges in Pakistan. and people would have better access to connectivity and so on and so forth. Kind of the biggest, the profound issue over there is that 5G is the last mile, right? So this is the technology that you use from your cell phone to the closest cell tower to talk to. Now this cell tower has to talk to the internet also, which is submarine cables and satellite links and so on and so forth. And there the internet is not as democratized, right? So we are a fringe node in the core internet itself. So actually there are times when Pakistan is entirely disconnected because some submarine link had a fault or something. And the bandwidth is also very scarce and expensive. So, you don't get the kind of connectivity, bandwidth and so on, accessibility that someone sitting in the US might, because they're in the core of the internet, right? So we are kind of almost a fringe node connected over a long submarine link that's controlled by someone else. So even if you get 5G within the country, in a country where you don't have any local domestic content, we use YouTube and we use WhatsApp and we use Facebook, all run from outside of Pakistan, of course, and therefore critically dependent on internet connectivity, which is scarce, which is fault prone, and which is expensive. So even if you get 5G last mile connectivity, which is high bandwidth and all of that, you don't really have any local services that you can leverage. You still are reliant on this backhaul internet connectivity, where you're a third-class citizen. So that sort of, so even if you get a first-class local connectivity, that's just the way the internet is governed and connected and so on. So we need more localized services, of course, and many countries now have that. We don't have any of that at all. So we all use WhatsApp and we all use, Facebooks and Instagrams. There's not a single local service that could kind of keep our connectivity running, God forbid if that submarine link goes down again. Or we misconfigure one of the routers and kind of block ourselves from the internet. Both of those have happened frequently in this country. But if there's one last question for Dr. Choi, we can take that question, sir. So one question, and there are plenty of speakers, and then you'll get an opportunity to ask them questions also. Sir, why don't you go ahead? And you can be loud too. Here's a mic.
Thank you. My name is Muhammad Ali. I'm an international relations expert. My question is basically, when we look at technology, since all of you are experts in technology, but I'll appreciate a social science perspective on it, that industrialized nations have an advantage in developing technology and using it for their social benefits. What about agrarian societies, which are not really industrialized in terms of their social structures and processes and cultures? So when you as a Pakistani look at technology, you obviously see it as an opportunity, but also perhaps as a threat. So I want to have a brief comment from Dr. Choi that what does technology mean for an agrarian society, which is not really an industrialized, it doesn't have an industrialized structure. Does it pose a threat to its social contract? Thank you.
Dr. Choi?
Yes, actually.
I think you're on mute.
Oh, really? No, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Yes. I'm not a technician. I'm not a tech expert, but I try to look at the technical development in like in the human side and scientific, social scientific, the perspective. And as you mentioned, actually the technology itself it actually changed the whole the way of how we work, live, the way we communicate, and it also changed the way of the power governance, and it all worked together. It's intertwined together to change it. And I think we are just in the middle of those a transition process, and we don't know the future, but we are surely in this transition process of technology changing the way that we live and how we communicate. And as in my slide, I had the Charlie Chaplin. The title of that film was modern times. And it was the modernity of that time, and we are looking for a new modernity. And we have to find the new modernity, that's what I believe, because we already see how fragile our world is. Recently, all the whole world experienced the pandemic, and we see today the theme of the dialogue is so timely, the navigating the powers, and we are also, Korea is also keen on that issue, and the risks are in a very high level, and if we don't find the way how we, the way we think, the social structure, we are in a very, in the risk of the disruption. So that's why I believe we are gathering today, and we try to share insights and collect the knowledges and wisdom of all the world to challenge to tackle these challenges.
Much for your time, for joining us today. We want to thank you for your great comments and for answering the questions. We are now going to move on to the next speaker. But before we do that, sir, to your question, the social contract with the farmer here is largely broken already. It's governed by a loan shark called the Aarti. And because of no financial inclusion and access to markets, actually I think technology can play a better role in enabling the farmer to have a better social contract with the rest of the world. They are really low down in the food chain, and I think technology can really help. We have the next speaker here is Mr. Suhail Ahmed, who's right next to me. Suhail Saab has an experience in the broadcast media industry. He's worked on very large projects for BBC, Sky News, Arabia, NBC, MBN, and so on. Large is more than $100 million is what his bio says. I think he's been, now he runs a very large company, from what I can tell, out of the UAE. It's called Diversified LLC. And he has 22 years experience of working in the broadcast media industry. This is television, all the infrastructure and so on, M&E and so on. Very good, sir. Thank you for joining us today. So you have the floor for 10 minutes and then maybe a bunch of questions at the end of it.
Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum and a very good afternoon to everyone. Thank you to IPRI for having me here amongst what I would say a very high caliber and intellectual group of panelists and speakers. So thank you for inviting me. Before I start, I think I would like to answer your question, which was using EMF to counter, I think, AI and sensors. Yes, you can use EMF to block any electronic comms. But I do hope you're not preparing for a cyborg attack. Moving on, so for me, I think I'd like to start with what technology is about. And any application that is engineered to solve a problem within a society is what is referred to as technology. In ancient times, when we started, this was all focused around agriculture, and we saw societies grow out of their inventions solving their agriculture needs, and food obviously at that point was quite important. And then in the modern times, I would say that today technology is all about blockchain, smart cities, smart devices, and then artificial intelligence. Learning from history, where if we look into the Mesopotamia era, the cradle of civilization, every technology puts a society at a particular forefront. But then we see the reverse of that sine wave where they start declining and then another society picks up. As a technologist implementing technology in the M&E space, we see this across various verticals. So in the old days, we had VHS distribution, and when Netflix came across distributing DVDs, that completely killed the VHS industry. The ones who adopted to more of a file-based system workflow survived and are still in existence, but the ones who did not adopt, Netflix completely took them out of the equation. Something to think about, where if we, the creator, are moving more towards becoming the creator, and in our endeavors do end up creating a more intelligent being, whether it is a robot with AI, then what does it mean for us? Is that the singularity where the created gets rid of the creator? Now, as my expertise are more on the M&E vertical, I'm going to focus some time on what we are seeing as growth areas in the coming 5 to 10 years. I've selected the 10 key ones that are really making an impact in terms of revenue. Mobile internet, we've heard talks about 5G, so that definitely will dominate and help bridge and speed up most of the delivery aspect of content or services. AI definitely will continue to grow. At the moment, we are seeing massive usage of AI in simplifying some of the compute responsibilities that were basically taken over by analysts. We are using AI in speech recognitions. We are using AI in security, so facial recognitions. This particular industry, we see a lot of growth, and we will see a lot more drivers pushing this forward. An opening over here I would see for Pakistan, especially the young engineers and people who are taking up software development. There's a good potential to become part of bigger companies out of Pakistan and lend your services and then grow with the, let's say, as AI as an industry grows. The other part is augmented and virtual reality. Again, use of these technologies were seen as a necessity for telling better stories. So Avatar, as an example, would not have been possible if we did not have virtual reality. So if you look at from the first black and white movie till where we are today, we can create these contents from the very mobiles that we hold and carry today. A lot of these content would be facilitated and driven with virtual and AR combined. Learning has become a lot more easier with AR. You can have a virtual experience in hospitals where students do not need to be around a body and can learn basic surgery procedures. So COVID actually in the last 2 years has propelled these technologies and their usage. So while we all were locked at homes, we're trying to work in a more safer environment, these technologies existed. But COVID essentially pushed all of us in terms of mainstream usage. And this will continue. Meta is a very good example of Facebook pivoting more towards a AR-based experience. At the moment, there are gaps in terms of that experience within the Meta environment, but rest assured, in the next 2 to 3 years, these gaps will be covered. Cloud technology, a favorite subject. Back in 2003, with a colleague, we sort of like together wrote the first white paper in cloud in terms of broadcast adaptation, where we would tell people that you would be able to run TV channels from the cloud. Was not taken very seriously at the time, but lo and behold, today, you guys, everyone over here is enjoying Amazon, Netflix, and similar OTT services. These are all running from the cloud. IoT, Internet of Things, every digital device is connected. From the microwave at your home to your parking, car sensors, everything can be interconnected as we try and use cloud computing and the Internet of Things to make more safer environments for the societies we live in. Advanced robotics. Well, this I will not go into the let's say the philosophical debates with robotics and whether they would take over mankind or not, but they are augmenting what our physical human bodies is not able to achieve. Exoskeletons, for example, allow you to carry more weight than what an average person can. Putting intelligence into that then solves a lot of warehousing issues to organizations like Amazon. As the largest digital retailer, they use an army of robots to take care of their warehouse needs, and that is how they are able to deliver the last mile rapidly. Not possible by using humans, unfortunately. Biometric technology would also be another area that would see potential growth. Recognition sensors for voice, eyes are getting smaller and more adaptive. We see more growth in biometrics in the next 2 years than content production. 3D printing, as we all know, is fundamentally replacing a lot of old molding technologies and allowing us to produce pens or buildings, for that matter, more rapidly than we have been able to do with conventional methods. Now, genomics, our understanding of our genetic structure, the more we know about ourselves, the better we are able to solve some of our underlying medical challenges. The more we grow in genomics, the more faster we'll be able to cure diseases like cancer. So being part of that, I would say we have the skill set within Pakistan. It's a matter of connecting it. Lastly, blockchain or distributed ledgering. It's more than NFTs and cryptocurrencies or trading in crypto. It is how trust can be maintained between unconnected private organizations or government entities. Developing an ecosystem within countries that, from a legislature point of view, facilitates blockchain is pivotal. Last but not the least, quantum computing. In the next 10 years, this is supposed to grow more rapidly because all the other industries I've just covered would rely on a lot of computing abilities that with the current tech stack will not be possible, and the only way to achieve that would be to more commercialize quantum computing, which at this stage is mostly around R&D, and then only few countries have systems that can deliver that process power. Now, with all of these advancements in technologies, we are presented with a problem, which is how does the staff or the HR or the human resource of today fit into this modern environment? How do we upscale their skills? How do we train them? Not all applications, I would say, everything would be a silver lining at the end of the tunnel. If we look at car automations, within the US, it is projected that about 500,000 drivers would lose their jobs as large haul trucks would be self-driving. Now, there would be a secondary impact of that where all the moms and pop shops which are around petrol pumps would end up getting closed because self-driving cars don't need to stop and eat. How that is resolved, uptrain them, upskill them, in my opinion, so that they can remain relevant to what is needed in the future. Emerging countries need to look at the curriculum they're teaching. For example, if we look at mass media, again, I'm not very much sure, but I think digital content production is not covered at a grassroots level, and students who pass out, let's say, from emerging countries today, they more are familiar with conventional methods, but they need to be geared up with digital methods. So a bit on pros and cons. What has technology done for us? We've become more faster, more connected, and we have access to smart devices giving us access to smart services. We can move things faster now. And we have better health care. However, that does not mean we have better health. Some of the cons are that I think with technology, as we've become more reliant on things being delivered, things taking care of themselves, we inadvertently have reduced our lifespans. More energy is needed to propel all of these technology and compute power. While we live in our environment, while we live on this planet, it is our responsibility to also keep it safe. So with the current progress in technology, climate change is obviously being impacted a lot. Last but not the least, we need to find a way of better training and better equipping our future rapidly, more fastly, to match the speed at which technology is changing and growing. How can I relate all of this to something that I understand and know? So I'm part of what's known as the media and entertainment industry. This industry by 2026, the global prediction of revenue is $3 trillion, out of which 33% is the US economy. Now this industry is divided into 5 key verticals, which are film, TV, video games, music, and publishing. All of these have grown exponentially through the advancement in technologies, be it Netflix, be it Disney, be it Amazon. They're all reaping the benefits of all the technology advancements and the sectors I've talked about. Now, just looking at the TV industry, which is one of the verticals within M&E, we believe that it is going to be about a $95.9 billion industry by 2022, which is, we're almost there towards the end of 2022, with a growth rate of 4.6. The war between Russia and Ukraine has definitely impacted, but a global recovery is in place. We always see during wars, there's a lot more content being produced. Unfortunately for M&E, war ends up being a good thing. I shouldn't be saying that, but that's how M&E is. Now within this space, the TV advertising market is expected to reach about $105 billion in 2026. The takeaway over there is that from this, at least 44% would be digital advertising. So for channels originating within Pakistan, if content, universal content can be produced, you easily have access to that 44% of revenue that is projected for 2026 within the TV industry. Lastly, within TV, I think one of the most favorite genres out here is news. So there's been a lot of advancement within how news is produced today versus how it was 10 to 15 years ago. Mojo, which is mobile journalism, is a very key word that is used, allows everyone in this room to pick up your mobile and become a journalist. There is always a debate about why certain content is not blocked on YouTube or Twitter, but then when you look deep inside, what they're trying to do is allow everyone to come up and make whatever statements they like. Very difficult to discern between facts and fiction. You go back to your old journalistic views of concurring what you read and see with multiple sources, and that's how you come to a point where the story is legitimate or not. Now, advancements in cloud computing basically has given everyone access to technologies where owning a TV channel or building your own content house is much, much, much cheaper than what it used to be 50 years ago, where only state players and actors could afford a TV channel. I see multiple cameras over here. I see multiple people trying to shoot this event, delivering it live. 10 years ago, this would have been on cable television at best. I've put a slide up which basically shows the process, which is the next one, of how news is prepared today within a compute stack. Now, whether you use AI or human resources, we have, if you start with you identifying your story, there are AI, let's say, stacks available that basically grow, read the internet, and then come back with relevant stories based on positive or negative feedback that they are getting. Now, if a channel decides that that's breaking news, off it goes, produces the contents, puts pictures or videos around that, CGs, and publishes it out depending on what platforms you are choosing to publish it to. If it's a normal story, it goes through the whole notion of getting produced, post-produced, and then delivered to the platform of choice. And then you have story enrichment. Story enrichment is when we use metadata to enrich and simplify searches. That's how a user, regardless on what consumption platform they are on, they will be able to find your stories or content a lot more easily. And that brings me to the end of my presentation. So thank you very much. I hope I was able to provide some information, if not all. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, Sohail Saab. What I'm going to do is, in the interest of time, let Dr. Nadeem also speak, and then we'll take the questions together. Dr. Nadeem has a PhD, Nadeem Hussain Nadeem has a PhD from University of Sydney and an MPhil from Cambridge. He shares some blame for this wonderful forum today. He was the executive director for the for IPRI for some time, and I very closely followed, of course, all the progress that IPRI made during his time. So wonderful work. I hope you do more of that in the coming years for this country. And he has interest in, he has varied interests. I met him some time ago. I was quite impressed with that conversation. He has interest in media, in how media is evolving, how political narratives are made, how data is analyzed, all of that. So that's all great stuff. He currently, he's been a fellow at the Wilson Center at USIP. He has 150 publications, which is 100 publications more than I have, and I've been in universities all my life. So that's great work also. And he was named Forbes 30 under 30 in law and policy. He also runs now a think tank called G5 Internet Observatory, which I don't know what it is, but I'm dying to find out. So Dr. Hussain Nadeem, if you could talk about living in the age of technology disruption, technological evolution. The floor is yours. You have 10 minutes because you have to get to Professor Singer at 5.
That's fine. Can I just sit over here and speak? Is that fine?
Up to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Musaf. And yes, I do share the blame of putting up this session just before I left IPRI. 10 minutes to essentially unpack a full semester level of conversation. So what I'm instead going to do is tell a story. Stories are easier to tell, always, and always are much interesting as well. So the story starts from 1610, when the Vatican started the trial of Galileo. Heresy trial, actually. He was charged with heresy for trying to prove that it was not the earth, it was not the sun, but the earth that revolved around the sun. 1633, he was convicted, and for the rest of his life, he was in the house imprisonment, where he died. It took almost 300 years for the Vatican to take his name out of the heretics list, and not really apologize, but yes, somewhat apologize into believing that yes, the earth does revolve around the sun. The reason why I'm talking about this thing is that we call the Galileo and his telescope the spark of enlightenment. That is where the age of reason started. But what we often miss is it was not just the age of reason or enlightenment. What really had happened was it sparked the age of human. And I say this very, very profoundly, that it was the age of human. And I, in terms of the ontology, I configured the history in 3 different stages. The age of gods, pre-Galileo, where the thought was driven essentially by belief and faith in mythology, from Greek to Roman to ABCD, to the age of Galileo, age of human, where the world was driven now by scientific method, some level of reasoning that was there, to now where we are in the age of technology, which is powered by planetary level of computation, the big data, the sentient machines. So these are the three configurations of history that I devise in my way of explaining this, what has happened. But to start with, really, when we talk about being a human in the age of technology, we need to first know what really human is. And you'd be surprised to know that human is actually not a very old concept. Human as a concept really started during the Enlightenment, where the question started by René Descartes, I think therefore I am, to then being refined by Locke, Hume, Plato, and then by Kant as well, to where it ended with Nietzsche, that the God is dead. What really Nietzsche was talking about was the age of gods was now dead and enter the age of human, where the human now have the agency to rationalize. So what really defined the human? I'm not going to go into too much detail about that, because then I'm going to start with Aristotle to Plato and all the way down to where we are. But to be a human must be separate from more than a nature. A human is more than a nature, and a human is also more than the machine that has been created. And somewhere within that separation from the nature, more than the plant, more than an animal, and from more than a machine that has been created, lies the human. And in that essence is really what we're talking about, the reasoning. And that has what defined the human in the 18th and the 17th century, started by Descartes, and the project that ended with Kant. The modern human as we know it, the agency, the sovereignty, the body, etc. Now, you'll be surprised that before that there was no concept of human as such. There was this project started from Descartes, ended with Kant, that stabilized human as a concept. And I'm going to say it again, stabilized human as a concept. That is very important, because what we see right now is that the creation itself, the technology, has made the human concept unstable again. Because what defined us as a human, the ability to think, the ability to rationalize, the age of technology, the machine has taken over that in many, many ways. So enter the age of technology. The technology has also evolved. So while the nature was evolving, the human was evolving, and the third thing that was evolving was technology, from mechanical product, the wheel, to basic machines, to now sentient beings. What has happened really, and I think Suhail has rightly pointed out, that the technology has created its own language, its own reality, its own culture, and its own socialization as well. That the technology is speaking to each other in its own language. And that is really, really remarkable, because it has created its own ethos and an ecosystem. If the technology is able to think and rationalize more powerfully, especially with quantum computing, than an average human, then the concept of human and what defines us has really shifted. So we have moved from believing in God to believing in the human, to now human becoming a God in itself. Sorry for the blasphemous terms throwing around, but I'm talking these as concepts, not as... So the point I'm trying to make is that in the last 7,000 to 8,000 years of human history, the concepts have evolved, and we tend to take, and I want to emphasize this thing, we tend to take human for granted, that somehow this was always there. We tend to take nature as granted, that somehow it was always there. We tend to take technology as granted, that somehow some prototype of it was already there. It was not. These things have been conceptualized, these have been prototyped, and the most important thing which I want to bring our attention to over here, because that's the next step where I'm going to go, is that these are unstable realities, which basically means that the concepts change with time and as a new reality emerges. The only difference is that we have moved from a world of human-led technology now to a technology-led human. And the two forces that are happening right now is this humanization of machine, where the machine is being made more and more like human-like. On the other end, where the gap is being reduced is machinization of human. My phone is an essential part of my body now. But will be a few more years before it actually gets injected into my vein, which will happen, by the way. So the machinization of human and humanization of machine, the gap between the two has eventually evaporated. Here comes the new reality which needs to be there, and I'm sorry, I don't have any answer to that. I can't possibly have an answer to that. Is what does the future of human look like then? Who are we going to be as a concept? Semi-creator we've already become. If one of the core tenets of being God was to create, we've already done that, we've accomplished that. So we are a sub-creator. But where are we going to move from being a sub-creation into something else? That's one of the most beautiful industrial questions that we are asking right now, is that the technology is pushing human for a change. It is making our realities unstable. It is making our core concepts that define us unstable. It is changing the core concepts of our belief systems, our living and etc. and transforming into something else. The question mark is, what is that we're going to transform into? And the key technologies to look at is essentially people call it artificial intelligence. I think the right word to use is synthetic intelligence, because human is becoming more like machine. So there is a humanization of machine. So I would rather call it synthetic than the artificial. That's very important. The impact is, I think, a rather small debate. We can talk about democracy and etc. It's rather simple to understand that the technology has a democratizing effect. We are living in a world where we have democratized information, democratized power. A fool can only believe that in this day and age, especially like in a country like Pakistan with 65% of the youth bulge, that you can somehow set out a press release and expect people to believe it. Or just tweet and expect people that somehow they're going to follow your narrative. The narrative is dead. There is no such thing as a narrative anymore. The narrative has been so democratized that each and individual over here in this room with a phone is a storyteller and is in a story in itself. So that is a rather easy point that we can talk about in length. But what I want to bring your attention, and I want to end my conversation with this, is that the human as a concept has changed. The reason why it still exists the way we think is because it was institutionalized. From Descartes to Kant, human was institutionalized through university structures, through systems, where we are still clinging on or latching on to the older concept of human and not really appreciating what a human could potentially become. So we are a prisoner to our own institutionalized, rigid understanding of human in a time where a technology has practically changed what a human is and what a human will be. I don't know what a human will become, but I do know that the 17th, 18th century human is dead. So is the 17th, 18th, I mean, the similar way that the mid-century, the medieval era of God is dead. Where are we going to move on to is probably Elon Musk is a better person to answer that. Thank you. That's all.
I really enjoyed that. Well, this can open up a can of worms, so let's open it and see where that takes us. We have, of course, lots of excited questions. Let's start from a female, if we could, perhaps. No? Okay, well, we are going to start with you, sir.
I should have shaved off my beard. My name is Khalid Banoori. This is a very fascinating discussion, and I'm not sure if I'm asking the right question or raising more, but I'm stuck with something that Suhail said, but the question is to the whole panel. When you said about you need to learn technology because in order to remain relevant, that is understandable to me. But what about the societies like Pakistan, where the technological prowess is still going to take several years, and there are parts of society which will perhaps become irrelevant? The example that you took about the truck towers in the US coming out of jobs, it can happen here. I can have a good driver who doesn't know how to use an app and cannot drive an Uber, and so on and so forth. The flip side of this is on the issue of technology itself. When you have more technologies coming in, and your, artificial intelligence and so forth, what are you telling the computer? What are you telling the algorithm? How humans think? With all our decision-making cycles, our follies, or is it going to be the algorithm taking a logical decision, and then more questions about the decision-making where there are some critical areas? So I'm just perhaps thinking aloud, but if anyone can say anything of it, thank you.
Very good. So Hilsa, why don't you go first? But just to quickly add to what you've said, if you don't know technology, you won't just be irrelevant. You might not be human also. This is what Hussain just said. So why don't you go first and then Hussain.
Okay. So technology, like any other thing, first, we need to look at it from our cultural standpoint and our, what we have in Pakistan and how we bring that to Pakistan. To answer the second part, which is, I've just lost my thought process.
So Hussain, why don't you continue to speak and we'll take it back from you.
I think the question...
The second part I just went out completely. So, all right, so as humans, we are very fragmented. We all have our own beliefs, whether we are of religion A, B, C, D, but even within that we have fragments. So within AI, at the moment, the biggest challenge, I don't know whether you guys would agree, but it is bias. Because the input is coming from humans. So that bias, how it would be filtered out in the future, right? There's a lot of work going on in the background. So for example, if you take a shopping app, the shopping apps at the moment are limiting themselves to 8 or 9 profiles. So if customer X buys this, right, sell him this, 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 and then they are like looking at trends and profiling all of them. So John in Pakistan versus John in Dubai versus John in US will all have different behavior patterns. So within the limitations of compute and how to translate what I would say consciousness and the way we make decisions, at the moment there is work going on in that. So what we see when you open Netflix and there's a recommendation to you, you might not like that, but it is coming out of profiles which are being created with bias.
Very good. So Hussain, do you want to quickly add something and then we'll take the next question? Quickly.
My only question regarding this is, which by the way is an industrial discussion itself, is why do you want to create machine-like, human-like? There's no need to do that. Because I think machine on its own can be much better in terms of reducing the bias, the confirmation bias, the prejudice and all of that, in terms of the human. For instance, the automation process in the future, where there would be an automated legislation, wouldn't need to be a human-like, because then the machines would be debating all day. On issues like climate change or extra existential threats, the automated parliaments will actually be able to make decisions based on the data that is there, not on the feelings or political party affiliation. The reason why we are in the mess where we are right now is because the data suggests something else. And the decision making, there is a big gap in between them. The decisions need to be made based on simple, foremost reasoning. Yet the decisions are being based on the emotional level. So the emotional side of the human, yes, it is good, but when it comes to the decision making on existential crisis, that is where it lacks. So I do think that machines will be more than humans, shouldn't be humans.
Very good. One final question from this side. We have a female wanting to ask questions. So go ahead.
Which?
Someone would need to pass you a mic, or you'll need to be really loud. And be loud.
On the philosophy of technology. My question to you is, sir, how can we form normative value judgment about technology without knowing all the use cases of technology itself? Where does this discourse end or begin? Thank you.
A good question, and I think I'll respond it by saying that technology is not an absolute in itself. It's a process and a consistent process of change. So don't take technology as some product that is out there. Take it as a sort of fluid concept and a fluid method of how you deliver on certain things. So when you have that understanding of technology as a process, then the normative angle of it doesn't need to be really there. Technology is going to continue to change, and with that will change whatever it touches, be it the human, be it the nature, and all of that. And I'll just give you to give you one example of this. The climate change was always a problem for thousands of years, right? Yet there was no concept of climate change predating 1990s. Climate change as a discipline, as a concept, emerged when we were able to have planetary level of computation. That we had enough data to actually go back in history and suggest what happened 10,000 years back and what will be able to happen in the next 7,000 to 8,000 years. So that emerged because the data and technology of that time was able to discover what was already there. So the technology, as you asked, it's creating new realities, new disciplines, new ideas, new threats, new opportunities as well. So treat technology as more from an angle of fluid machines instead of something which is in there in stone.
One final question from okay, a grey-haired woman, which is great, which is what we need right now.
Thank you.
Okay.
Mic up there.
The mic is right behind you.
Well, I'm a retired ambassador, Fawzia. Hussain, the question from you. You said the Homo sapiens took centuries to evolve. The technology is evolving every day. So there doesn't seem to be any competition between humans and the technology, but as technology begins to transform itself so quickly that humans are unable to keep pace with that, there comes a question of moral responsibility. Decision making can be logical, fine, which ultimately will be for the benefit of the humankind, but decision making cannot be by machines. The ultimate responsibility is that of the human beings. Your comments on this?
Thank you. Yes and no both, depending on the situation. I mean, you don't have to give entire decisions to the machines, but there are way too many decisions that actually the machine can take over, even right now. A lot of those decisions can be taken which are not existential threats, for instance. So that portion can be done, which by the way, machine can take it much, much better than you. For instance, in terms of, if I have one example, in terms of the judicial decisions, I do personally think that the entire logic of having the court system in today's age is pointless. When you can really just train the machine in all the decision making and all the laws, and then it will be able to literally give decisions based on what is out there instead of the way it is being done. And the whole process of, you know, the delays and all of that can really be removed. I'm not saying that for every decision, but the base level decisions on the property and the marriage clause issue, it can be sorted out if you feed enough data to the machine, and I think that's really doable. Again, with too many things that the machine can translate. But yes, certain decisions can never be really replaced humans, but I do think in those decisions, human itself will become part machine, which we have really now transformed into.
Let me quickly add one sentence to what he said, which is that God and humans share one trait, which is they want to control everything but what they create. So I'm not sure whether the ultimate responsibility lies with humans, because we said so. Technology may want to question at some stage. We want to move to the next speaker. Do you want to add something?
Just to add to that, I guess even human decision making, at the end, it's about perspective. So the decision maker's perspective, if it's gonna, let's say, overpower what is right and wrong, at the end of it doesn't matter. So AI making more logical decisions based on data, to me is a lot more better.
Very. Yeah, that's what God said also. Multiple times in many scriptures. Okay, so moving on to the next speaker, which is Mr. Asadullah Naveed. He's from Google. He's a senior software engineer there. He works on large infrastructure projects at Google, and especially to do with augmented reality. So he might say interesting things about this emerging field of AR, VR, augmented or virtual reality. So he joins us from Googleplex, from what I can tell, or from Singapore, I don't know. But he'll show up on all these screens shortly.
Hello, can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay.
Minutes? 10 minutes, huh?
Great, thank you, sir. It's truly an honor to be here at the Markala Dialogue in such a esteemed company. My thanks to IPRI and the organizers for including me in this panel. So the world is a very different place today than it was when I was a freshman at Lund selecting computer science as my major in 2009. The phone in my pocket was a BlackBerry with a click wheel. Mobile data in Pakistan was on 3G speeds, and Facebook was relatively new. Our parents weren't on it. Twitter and Instagram didn't exist. Google Assistant and Siri did not exist. Phones did not have selfie cameras until the iPhone 4, which came out in 2012. We've come a long way since then. The rapid growth of the technological landscape has been quite transformative for humanity. It's really hard to imagine our day-to-day activities today without modern inventions like touchscreens and smartphones, GPS, and Wi-Fi. Such technologies are really essential to our lives today. It's powering this talk right now and have affected the way that we perceive and reason about the world around us. Modern technology has really enabled humans to be connected to each other in ways few people thought of as recently as 40 years ago. The vast majority of human-human interactions that happen today occur via a computer or phone screen instead of in person. I often find that it's far more efficient to juggle multiple text thread conversations than talk with a single person on the phone for 20 minutes. That's very different from how people operated only 2 generations ago, where the vast majority of human-to-human interactions were in-person interactions with people in their geographically local communities. And in contrast, today, infants exposed to technology often learn to interact with touch screens sooner than they develop their full language skills. As a result, geographic distances now hold less weight since loved ones are often only a WhatsApp call away. This hyper-connectedness has also enabled people to find both social communities and an audience for their work free from geographic constraints. And what this enables is an exchange of ideas on a global scale. Social media platforms particularly are powerful engines for enabling this. People turn to these platforms to stay connected with loved ones, view life updates from celebrities, and read news about events happening not just in their communities, but worldwide. And these social media platforms are made free and accessible via millions of dollars in advertising revenue. And they're powered by data-driven algorithms to show users content that keeps them engaged with the platform for as long as possible. So these can often result in people getting connected with others that share their same interests and hobbies or discover new markets for their work. People become generally more aware of life and norms out in other parts of the world, and the free flow of information has also made people more aware of basic human rights and has even helped gather wide-scale support against oppression and persecution. But that all sounds rosy, but there is also a much more sinister effect. People can, by following or unfollowing people and trends, which is a common feature in most social media platforms, they can inherently select the content and viewpoints that they're exposed to. And quite often, they'll not want to engage with content that challenges them or makes them feel uncomfortable because it goes against deeply held views or beliefs. And this often results in the creation of thought echo chambers where users willingly consume information that only reinforces pre-existing ideas and viewpoints instead of challenging them. And unfortunately, we have seen that people are much more uninhibited and emboldened when making statements behind the veneer of anonymity, since a major deterrent to any socially or unacceptable behavior is removed, which is accountability for your work. So given the millions that social media companies like Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter have invested in content moderation and combating hate speech on their platforms, it's no secret that unbridled free speech is not always a desirable thing. The standards for what constitutes hate speech are not universally standardized, and policymakers have not, unfortunately, just not kept up with the pace of technological growth. Historically, social media companies have been at the helm of deciding what speech gets blocked or not. But recently, governments and policymakers, the EU in particular, have started rolling out these policies to rein in tech companies' gluttony for data and give users more agency around how much of their data can be collected by these companies to fine-tune their machine learning models. There's been regulations like GDPR, which is the General Data Protection Regulation, and DMA more recently, the Digital Marketplace Act, which have left tech companies scrambling to have their pre-built massive systems be compliant with the language present in these regulations. And as someone who works on compliance with these policies, I can tell you that the cost of compliance with these efforts is substantial, is highly significant, and primarily because policymakers are not engineers, they don't speak their language, and they tend to prescribe regulations that aren't always the most efficient solutions to the underlying problem. But unfortunately, most regulatory bodies are not as magnanimous in their goals. Governments and regimes are increasingly, under the guise of protecting consumers and the public, are enacting loosely worded policies that can be and are often used to compel tech companies to hand over data and suppress or censor journalists and dissidents and political opponents. And all of those three things are essential to any democracy. And not only that, populist leaders are able to quite effectively wield the power of social media echo chambers to advance populist rhetoric, spread misinformation, and incite violence on a scale that simply wouldn't have been possible if they weren't able to use these tools like social media. And one particularly damning incident was the insurrection on the US Capitol in Washington in January 2021. These events all show the power of hyperconnectivity to empower and enable humanity's worst tendencies, in my opinion. But despite all that, at the end of the day, we must remember that technology all of these things are human-made tools. They are machines which are quite adept at making decisions based on vast amounts of historic data. The previous speaker just said this, and they don't necessarily employ empirical reasoning. And machines are only getting better at this and becoming more efficient at this. But if we hand over more and more control of what happens to the world to the speed and efficiency of unthinking and insatient deciders, which are these machines, we misunderstand several fundamental points. I think humans aren't inherently slow or dumb. Humanity isn't slow or dumb, and machine efficiency is a very poor model for understanding ourselves. And if we try and cut people out of every possible loop for cutting costs and reducing turnaround time, the better to assure speed, profit, or military success. It's a pretty poor model for a future in which humans and machines equally and jointly maximize their capabilities. Our creations we're certainly at the precipice where they're certain to grow far beyond our current comprehension, and how fast and how far is perhaps our most, I think it's a very urgent existential question. Who we become and where we go from here is really the key to that is understanding ourselves. And our best hopes for progress, actually, they're quite simple, really. We understand ourselves better. We ask what aims may or may not serve our survival and thrival, and we build systems that serve rather than subvert these at a high level. But it's really an amazing time to be alive, to be able to have these discussions together despite being so far away from each other. But I think that if there's one thing that our collective articulacy as a species brings home is that people care above all about other people. They don't necessarily care about machines. They don't necessarily care about the opinions of machines. They care about people, what they think, love, hate, fear, what makes them laugh, and more importantly, what people can accomplish together. That's it for my piece. I might use the rest of my time.
Thank you, sir. That was very informative. We're going to take questions together with after Peter Singer's talk, just in the interest of time. If you want to stay on, that's great, and thank you for waking up really early in the morning to be able to do this. And our next speaker is Professor Singer, who needs little introduction. He's a very well-known professor of bioethics. He, among other things, is the editor of the Journal of Controversial Ideas, which I often follow on the internet. It's actually quite a publication. He's a moral philosopher, specializes in applied ethics and approaches in ethical issues from a secular utilitarian perspective. He has written and co-authored about 50 books, and his writings have been translated into 30 languages. So we are here to hear Professor Singer talk about bioethics and how technology is going to impact what humans are going to be in future. So Professor Singer, you can take as long as you want.
Thank you very much. So I've just been listening to the last few minutes of your discussion and very interesting topics. The question of what it is to be human is certainly going to get tested or is already being tested by a variety of different technologies and in different ways. As you said, I'm a professor of bioethics, so I am going to start with the biological sciences rather than with artificial intelligence and computer sciences, but I am also then going to move on and say something about artificial intelligence. That obviously can't be ignored in any discussion of this kind. But let me start with the biological sciences. What we are and what it is to be human is clearly related to our genetics, to the human genome, which has evolved over millions of years and separated us from our closest surviving relatives anyway within perhaps a few 100,000 years. And if we consider Neanderthals as relatives, then obviously, though human in some sense, even much more recently. But what is new, and I think I just caught this being said on the panel as I was coming online, is the fact that we are starting to be able to control this, that godlike power, as was said, that we humans now have. And although this is only right at the beginning, we have quite recently developed the ability to edit our genes in a reasonably precise way that was never there before. When I was just starting to work in bioethics in the 1970s and 1980s, that possibility was already being discussed of changing the human genome by inserting genetic material, especially in relation to those who had serious genetic diseases. But it really could not be done properly. We could not put the genetic material in any precise place, and it would end up in unexpected places, sometimes with very disastrous results. This work was done on animals, but we could see that it was not going to work well. But the development of the technique known as CRISPR in the last decade or so has created the possibility of doing this much more precisely, of inserting and changing genetic material. And this is now starting to be done in the case of treating some genetic diseases. Sickle cell disease, for example, is something that patients have now been treated, only still in rather small numbers. This is experimental, but the early results appear to be promising. What is distinctive about what has been done so far, though, in one respect, is that it is not affecting the reproductive cells. It's not affecting the eggs or sperm. And so, although it helps the patient, which of course is the aim of the procedure, it is not being passed on to future generations. And bioethicists have tried to draw an important distinction between what is going to be passed on and what is not, a distinction between what is referred to as somatic therapy and germline therapy. And mostly they have said that this is an important line that we should not cross. It was famously crossed a few years ago by the Chinese scientist He Jiankui, who treated human embryos in a way that was intended to reduce the risk that they would develop HIV or AIDS. That was done because the father was HIV positive, but it was done without proper approval from the Human Experimentation Ethics Committee or its equivalent, and it's generally agreed that it was a highly risky procedure that may have given some protection against HIV, but that could have been done perhaps in other and safer ways, and that does run the risk of having other less desirable, possibly undesirable effects. So He Jiankui was sanctioned, and in fact I think he spent the last 2 or 3 years in prison as a result of what he did. But while I agree that that was an unwise and unethical form of human experimentation, I'm doubtful that the line between somatic and germline therapy will be able to be held in general. We have conditions which I think it would be more ethically justifiable to try to change. I'm thinking here of conditions that are uniformly fatal, genetic conditions like Tay-Sachs disease or Lesch-Nyhan syndrome, which are always fatal in infancy or early childhood. And they are single gene diseases, and it's possible to alter them in ways that might mean that the surviving child, who would then survive, would be able to reproduce without fear of carrying on that disease. And that seems to me to be a more ethical thing to do, because the risk to the child is in fact nil, given that the child is going to die and die in some cases with significant suffering. That is something that I think could be defended. But then the more longer term questions are whether we will continue to treat other conditions which are less fatal, and whether not only will we cross the line between somatic and germline treatment, but whether we'll cross the line between therapy and enhancement, which again is a line that is somewhat not really precise. Obviously, to treat somebody with Tay-Sachs or Lesch-Nyhan is therapy. But what about treating someone with depression? If we find genes that cause depression, a devastating condition when it can't be treated by the methods of medicine that we have today, and we treat depression, we find genes that avert depression, maybe those same genes will not only avert depression, but lead to a more positive mood, a more positive temperament, which many people would like their children to have. Wouldn't it generally be better to have a cheerful, optimistically inclined child rather than one who was gloomy and pessimistic, even if the gloom and pessimism were not so severe as to be clinical depression? I think many parents would want that. And of course, the other trait that many parents would want in their child is intelligence. If we find, it certainly won't be a single gene, but we may find clusters of genes that have that are related to the intelligence of a child. And again, if we start to develop the CRISPR technique in ways that it can be widely used on several genes, then we may have the possibility of engineering children not simply to avoid subnormal intelligence, but to enhance intelligence. And if that becomes possible, then I imagine parents may wish to choose that. And in fact, gene editing would not be the only way to choose that. Another possibility would be to use in vitro fertilization to produce multiple embryos, to screen those embryos, and to find which of one's own embryos would be the most intelligent, or again, the most cheerful, or whatever other characteristics one may wish to see in a child. And in those ways, we may over time start to change us by degrees, and still I would say this is clearly still within the limits of what it is to be human, but we are starting to take control over what our species is like. Will those things be good or bad? I think that given the problems we have, if we can safely improve mood and improve cognitive abilities, that would not be something that I would automatically say is wrong, either because it's done on the germline or because it's enhancement rather than therapy. I think, particularly with regard to intelligence, we face a lot of very serious problems, and if people with greater problem-solving skills are around, we may have greater chances of dealing with those problems. So that's the first part of what I want to say. But I do now want to say something about what I know you've already been talking about, the development of artificial intelligence and the prospects of artificial general intelligence, and what is sometimes referred to as superintelligence. There clearly will be interesting social problems about this. For example, problems of employment. I just caught, as I came online, the remark about replacing judges or replacing some of the work of the judiciary with AI. And obviously, if we are going to do that, that will streamline court systems and we will have fewer delays, which will be a very good thing. But some judges, and no doubt other lawyers, it won't be only judges, the AI may well prepare the briefs as well as make decisions, will become unemployed or have less employment. And if that is true for an area that requires as sophisticated cognitive skills and judgment as the judiciary, then it's clearly going to be even more so for areas that are somewhat more mechanical or routine. So we will have a lot of social problems with that, I would expect. But that will not in itself change being human. It's rather more, I think, the development of what Nick Bostrom in a famous book is called superintelligence that may change what it is to be human. And that is the idea that we produce an intelligence that is smarter than us, at or equal to or superior to the level of human beings, not just in one specific thing. You might say, well, we've already got artificial intelligence that's smarter than us. It can beat us in chess, it can beat us in Go, but the much larger task is to produce superintelligence that can do better than us in a broad range of domains and problems. And a survey that Bostrom and colleagues took a few years ago asked scientists when they thought there was more than a 50% probability of having such superintelligence. And the median answers, I think, were in the range, they asked different groups of scientists, in the range of 2040 to 2060. So 2040 is getting fairly close now, less than 20 years, and even 2060 for younger members of the audience who can expect to see this happen if those scientists are right, and I'm not saying they are right. But there certainly is a possible problem here, which Bostrom and others have alerted people to, and that is the problem, will the superintelligence be aligned with us in its values? And if not, is there a risk that it will actually take over from us and quite possibly find us not very useful for its objectives and get rid of us? And if that happens, will we be able to stop it? Bostrom's view is that if it really is smarter than us, it won't be as simple as just pulling out the plug to the super intelligent computer. It will have anticipated us in doing that and will have found ways to circumvent that. So there is a real possibility there, I think, that we will find ourselves in that kind of situation, and there are various people now working on how to prevent that. Of course, that would not be so much changing our human nature as ultimately replacing our nature, although some of the same people also talk about the possibility that we might download our brains or download the content of our brains to computers and then actually live in a computer simulation rather than in a biological organism. The assumption here is that there is nothing unique or special about a carbon-based biological organism in terms of consciousness, or in terms of the brain, or the contents of the brain or the mind, and having those experiences. That, of course, is still to some extent controversial, but I tend to agree that in principle you could have an emulation of the brain and all of the nerve connections that took place in a different kind of medium, in other words, in silicon chips, perhaps. So we would certainly have the question then, if that happens, whether we are human, have we become transhuman, have we become better than humans in some way? And the ultimate question, I think, that I would like to leave you with is, would that really matter? Is it essential that we remain human in the sense that we are now? Or is what is really important that our consciousness continues, that intelligent life, intelligent and conscious life continues? Whether or not it's still biologically human, whether or not we can say this is still a member of the species Homo sapien, or whether this has become something quite different. My own view is that it is, in fact, the preservation of consciousness, self-awareness, and intelligent life that is really important. And obviously life that has the capacity for the positive experiences that we have, for experiencing pleasure, for happiness, for fulfillment, for life satisfaction. And I would also hope would have the values to wish that to extend to all conscious beings, whether those conscious beings are still biologically human or whether they are in fact conscious superintelligence or conscious artificial intelligence of any kind. I would think that they would have moral status too. And also, and this relates to another part of my work, to non-human animals as well. We are preserving in this world also biological organisms, the non-human conscious animals that we share our world with, whether they are chimpanzees and bonobos, or dolphins and whales, or for that matter, pigs and cows and chickens. I would hope that we would also, and superintelligence would also have the aim of giving them a life that was as good as possible, a life in which suffering was minimized or avoided, and all beings could enjoy their lives to the best possible capacities that they have. I admit that this is a somewhat optimistic view to end this talk on. Some of you may think it's a naively optimistic view, given that we are in a world which is so far struggling not very successfully to combat human-caused climate change. And I know that in Pakistan particularly, you have suffered earlier this year catastrophic floods, which I think were so clearly climate change related, or certainly were made more probable by climate change. And in my own native country, though I'm not there at present, in Australia, there are, again, we've had a whole series of floods this year. So we are struggling to control climate change. We have a war going on in Ukraine, which is devastating for that country, and also pushing up the prices of food, which is very bad for poorer parts of the world. So you might say it's very optimistic to think that we are going to somehow develop artificial intelligence that will be aligned with our values and will preserve what is important and positive in our lives while reducing suffering. But I do think that that is possible if we can overcome the present problems and if we can indeed preserve our species from extinction and develop technologically in ways that we extend what we've been doing over the last century or so, and particularly in the last couple of decades. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Professor Singer. We're going to open the floor for questions, and we're going to take it from the young gentleman up front.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Tariq Heather. I'm a retired ambassador at the NDU. It's a fascinating series of speakers. I just wanted to say, in a way, one title could be How to be Relevant in the Age of Technology. And I think the central question is that while technology creates jobs, right now it is destroying more jobs. And how do we have the balance there? And how in a country like Pakistan, where we're behind the educational curve, how will we be able to adapt to this? I think that's in my mind. Thank you.
Professor Singer, sure.
Do you wish me to respond to that?
Thanks. There was an experiment done by Lemon Blay, a Google employee, and he created a chat box Lambda. So artificial intelligence actually started talking back, and once it talked back, it said that I fear, I'm happy, I'm disappointed also, and I have read Les Miserables also. So I don't have this problem with AI as long as it is, replacing judiciary or replacing, other things. But I have a serious problem once it takes over the killing machines. We have not developed any kill switch because it should be amenable to human intervention and monitoring. I don't know whether it is doing. Then we are designing through AI those means of destruction which have immeasurable impact on humanity. And they are even destructive than the nuclear forces. But we are living in an age where international humanitarian law is still configured to our old mode of warfare. So what would be the method to bring human agency back into controlling AI-driven warfare? Second from Hussain. Dr. Hussain, I know you have a proclivity for social media and its weaponization of its narratives, and I couldn't agree with you more that everyone is going to be a journalist. So if everyone is a journalist, then who is the content taker? And there's so much lies being peddled on social media. Who's going to moderate it? And then there's so much of ad revenue. One of the panelists told us 105 billion, and out of that 44% will go to the digital media. So don't you think we need to do something at the global level? Because if ad revenue is driving lies, then where would humanity stand?
We should probably get answers to these questions, and we'll come back to you. Professor Singer, do you want to take up the first question, which is how technology will create more unemployment than employment? That was the first question. And then the second one is how money creates lies, but one would argue that that's how it's always been. It's just more convenient now, perhaps. But Professor Singer, do you want to go first?
Thank you, but I don't really have a lot of expertise on the issue of how to prevent unemployment being caused by the development of AI. In the past, though, I will say, we have often been worried about this by automation of simpler kind in factories, and we have generally found other work. We found that increased productivity has benefits, and people are able to do then other things. So I'm not totally pessimistic about this, but I do think it will certainly cause some temporary problems along those lines. In terms of advertising promoting lies, I think you're quite correct that this is certainly not really new. But I think we do need some regulations, and one of the things that troubles me about social media is the fact that it gets around the issues of defamation or libeling that were controlling what newspapers would publish and still control what newspapers would publish because they can still be sued for defamation. Whereas you post something on Twitter or Facebook, you post complete nonsense, let's say like that, as said before the 2016 election, that Hillary Clinton was running a pedophile ring out of a pizza parlor in Washington, and she has no legal recourse to that. I mean, that's absurd. I think really that social media should be compelled to take some legal responsibility for what they put up. That is certainly going to change social media. It will make it vastly more difficult for them to post news. But it will also eliminate at least those kinds of clearly defamatory and blatant falsehoods that do arouse people to take extreme political action.
Thank you, Professor Singer, for this. Let me try and answer two important things that you raised. One is war, which is the kill switch. Now, if we assume that AI is essentially data playing out in decision making, that's what AI is. It gets trained based on lots and lots of evidence or data and then makes decisions accordingly. That's what AI in one line is. And if that is the case, given the wealth of data about how wars have panned out in the history of humanity, I don't think AI will choose war. I think humans will, and we do continuously make that poor choice in wanting to control the existential questions. But AI equipped with data and no biases will likely not choose war. But Hussain should probably go next. But one thing that I do want to add in terms of taking away jobs, not just, technology, certainly AI, of course, perhaps, but technology is also access to better labor markets. Now, Pakistanis, because we have so many of them in this country, we're the 5th largest country in the world, and mostly young people, mostly university graduates, Pakistan 73% urbanized, everyone has a smartphone, etc. Given this configuration, what happened during COVID is that a lot of work that got converted into remote work eventually found its way to countries like Pakistan. So what's going to happen immediately is that countries like Pakistan would benefit immensely by being able to participate in the global labor market. And that's not just technology labor market. It is also my accountant who's barely done some kind of little degree to file my taxes, being able to practice, filing of taxes or accounting, whatever he does, in the US market, because that's what he's doing. I used to pay him 30,000 rupees for filing my taxes. And now he can make 30,000 rupees an hour doing work in US with the same skill, using these kind of online marketplaces and where work is getting outsourced in what is called the gig economy, where you're not on a permanent contractual job, but you're doing task to task, $5 a piece, $10 a piece, takes you a couple of hours to do it. So I think this future of work, so to speak, is going to be remote, is going to be flexible, it's going to be driven by a gig economy, and I think countries like Pakistan only stand to benefit from it. AI, has many connotations in understanding. As someone who's kind of done a PhD in this about 21 years ago when this field was in its infancy, people attribute too much glory to AI. AI has been around for a long bloody time. It's essentially just kind of, machines taking in a lot of data and churning out decisions, which are repetitive in nature. So in the AI world, when people ask us which jobs, will diminish because of the advent of AI, the simple answer is that if there's anything that you can do repetitively, anything that you can do in 5 minutes or 10 minutes, which doesn't require a lot of decision making or skill, will eventually get automated by the advent of AI. It's not going to be more than that. Machines can't think. Machines have no emotions. Machines have poor decision making. They only do what is told in terms of live data that's being fed to them. AI, as you know, is a software or AI has been around for now decades. It only does what it is told to do. The only thing that has changed that it is what it can be told now could be in gigabytes. Large amounts of data can go in for it to make decisions. We're still going to make decisions based on data. It is not innovative, it's not creative, it's not God. So, you know, it's also important to put technology and AI in perspective from someone who actually, you know, people who kind of, you know, work on it. So there's kind of a layman's point of view of some robot taking over the world or some, you know, none of that's going to happen, sir. So, you know, AI doesn't work that way. Just looking at the machine that was built by God, you know, millions of centuries ago, has evolved quite a bit. Machines would take also quite long to get that far. And they have some kind of, by design, they have some flaws and will not be able to compete with humans on many levels. So, you know, the times I go to these talks and there are times I spent hours trying to explain that as someone who, you know, who really kind of understands this kind of stuff. We over-glorify AI all the time, and we need to really stop doing it. Otherwise, you know, we'll have fantasy talks and conversations about things that don't really exist. There is a question from an older gentleman at the back, and then we'll come back to you, sir. I call you older because I called him young, so that's the joke.
I'm fine with that. Thank you. My name is Mohammad Samazia. Thank you for the brilliant deliberations. My question is for Dr. Nadeem. I would like to understand the concept of the modern human, the human which will be, you know, which will have a cyber or a modern technological component to it. What exactly is, you know, what exactly is going to happen in the scheme of the things? And do you reckon, given that we are a far less developed country and we don't have a monopoly over technology and the artificial intelligence, is there going to be monopolization by the West, especially more advanced countries, which also include China? Do you reckon this is something that's going to happen? And if yes, how exactly should we prepare ourselves starting today? Thank you.
I'm going to start. I'm going to start off by answering Director Researcher's question. And I've probably talked about this way too many times before as well. When it comes to social media, I have two things to say. One, disinformation is as old as the information itself. So there is nothing new about it. And we need to treat it as such. Which basically means we need to not panic in the current situation. So the panic is one of the main problems that create a multiplier effect to the issue of disinformation. The second thing, but what has really happened is the speed of disinformation has changed. So has the medium. The speed and the medium are now at a pace where the bodies that are supposed to produce information cannot match the speed of the disinformation. That is where the real problem is. And again, give you one example of this, why this is the case, because I worked with the government on this subject. Year 2000, I was still probably 13 years old, there was only one state-run broadcaster, PTV. Raat ka khabarnama, 9 p.m. bulletin, and from then till next morning, something happens in the country, people will not know. So that was the case. Fast forward 2010, under General Musharraf's era of media liberalization, we had about 150 news channels talking 24/7. And I remember back in the days when I was still in college, it was a panic. How on earth that a narrative of the nation that was being run through press release or through press conferences of the ministers and the state officials is now being directly challenged by these two-bit journalists who are now 24/7 on media and they're saying whatever they want to say. No checks and balances. 2000, one state-run broadcaster, 2010, 150 private-run broadcasters, to now 2020, 75 million individual broadcasters on social media. The problem, the fundamental issue over here as a state is that the state is still living in the 17th century institutions. We are a post-colonial state designed for the 17th century problems. Unfortunately, with the mindset of the 12th century. So there is that problem. try to solve the problem of the 21st century where there is an explosion of data. Umar Bhai probably is much better aware of this, that for our state institutions, they don't have the capacity to even collect all the data and information that is coming, yet alone process it, refine it, develop insights out of it, and then be able to tackle and challenge it. So what do we do in return? Sad to say, but we probably send FIA to someone's home and try to pick that person up, thinking that it might solve the problem. The net result is there is a multiplier effect and the situation gets out of control. So what really needs to be done whenever we talk about information or disinformation is, one, our ability to process the information, and two, controversial thing to say, but I'll still say it because I'm no more part of any institution anymore, but the biggest producer of disinformation is the government itself. If you want to tackle the disinformation, stop producing it. You could look at any document released by Pakistan Bureau of Statistics, FBR, ABCD, the type of disinformation that comes out of our information-making bodies. That itself opens a Pandora box which lead to these problems. So the way to fight disinformation is, because state is a very huge body. A 16-year-old kid using TikTok and all cannot change the narrative of the nation or a state, cannot possibly be a threat to the national security. You're the only big threat to national security yourself if your reactions are over the top and you're not able to control your information mechanism. So I do think that disinformation can be sorted out by breathing deeply. I think yoga would be a great way for the policy leadership to get over some random tweets against themselves. And part of the reason why I say that is because digital is still in a jungle phase. It's an infancy stage. It will take some time for the people to realize what is real, what is fake. And I do think that much of the fake information does not come from the youth that we love to hate so much. It actually circulated in the retired officials groups, because they don't have the DQ, the digital quotient, to know whether this is true or not. I mean, I do personally think that my mother is the biggest producer of pusher of fake information, because she can't tell if this image is doctored or not. So for somebody like digital natives, they can tell in a split of a second that this is not true. And I do think that we as the social media users are now evolving into a stage where the problem that we see of disinformation and all, the human will be intelligent enough to know that this is true and this is not. And those things for the ad budget, that again is a separate debate. The disinformation will always remain there, but we will not have the same level of vitality. It is new, it is pinching us, hence there is a problem. The leadership that will come later on, the prime ministers, the chief of army staffs, 2 years down the line, 5 years down the line, they will be immune to it. And then this will not be a problem. I think this will be standard modus operandi. As far as the question related to the being a human is concerned, in the modern, what is a modern human, I do think that modern human is yet to be born, or in other words, yet to be conceptualized. So the human that we have right now was conceptualized by Descartes and then refined by Locke, Hume, Kant and all of that. And the modern human as we know it is yet to be formed, because the speed of technology is way too fast for it to rest to a place where we can sit and conceptualize what a human is right now and what a human will become later on. Hence the end part of my talk was really about opening up to the question that I'm not sure what a human is right now, what a human will be in the future. But I do know that the human of the 17th century has become unstable. The concept of human developed by Descartes is now unstable. A new human will emerge. What kind of human will that be? What kind of socialization will he have, or he or she have? What kind of the world that will emerge out of that human, that is yet to be formed. But if you look at a very small example of this, I'll give you a chromosome of it. My ex-boss, SN Iqbal Sahab, used to give this an example, a very profound example actually, that when he was young, for any problem at home that would emerge with any TV, car or anything, he would run to his father to get answers. And the father will be able to give some level of answer and all. So the father was actually the most, the advanced Google search at that period. Yet he says that when I grew up, for everything that would go wrong with technology at home, I would run to my child. So the digital technology, the phone, the software updates to taking pictures. So our parents would turn to their parents, but our parents are now turning to us for help. What this has really done is that it has changed the status quo at the domestic individual household level. The power has shifted. You don't go to your mothers or fathers now for information. You go to Google. So the role of the mother and the father has transitioned. It became unstable first, then it transitioned because there is too much information out there. The status quo changed, which is why, I mean, most of the parents are now usually complaining that their children don't listen to them. They will never listen to you because they have much more information available outside. So the status quo has changed. Where will this status quo lead to, and what will be the new society that will emerge? If the domestic household has changed in status quo, we can well imagine that this youth that someone or anyone is trying to control, it will never be controlled. Don't even try. So the only way you can actually do is become more immersive with technology. One, understand that the technology has made certain things unstable. So the chaos we see is really a result of that. Two, try to embrace the technology in a way where it doesn't hurt you much. And third, really change yourself. That's the only thing I think. The state needs to change, the policy needs to change, and so on and so forth. Thank you.
Final question, and then we will wrap up because I've been passed down notes. I have serious threatening notes in my pocket right now, advising me to close the session in 5 minutes. So I have no choice, sir, in a state where FIA can come and pick me up. This young woman right here.
For 10 minutes.
10 minutes?
My question to Dr. Hussain, you have talked about state narrative. So, society is transforming very fastly, but state is not transforming with the pace with which the society is transforming. This is the gap. So do you not think that the state, which is poorly equipped in technologically, it will become existential threat for the state in future?
The future, it already has. Part of what we are facing right now is that what Hamza Alvi wrote in the 1972 was that we have an overdeveloped state. Now, the purpose of the state is to actually serve the public. When the state becomes bigger than itself, and it starts serving itself. And what the problem with the post-colonial states like ours, or many other in the South Asia and other places, is that at some point the state flips over to a crisis-like situation where it only tries to protect itself. And that is where we are right now. So I don't think it's about the future. You look at, and I'll give you one small example of this. Just go over the hiring process of the state institutions. And you will have a very good idea what kind of hiring process, the qualifications, and I think Umar Bhai might already know about this thing, the advertisement for the general manager of the digital media wing required 25 years experience in digital media along with a PhD.
Oh, I must have missed that very exciting advertisement.
Imagine Mark Zuckerberg would not qualify for it, Elon Musk wouldn't qualify for it. So the state really needs to change its hiring methodology, and I think most of the situation might be able to solve with that.
Fantastic. One final question.
Finally, my name is Seema. I'm also a former ambassador. And you're very right. We are trying to learn from our children to stay relevant because it's become very difficult even to understand the WhatsApp language. The first time I heard FOMO and BRB, I didn't know what it meant. So one is learning. My question really is that, you spoke a lot about hyper-connectedness, as somebody called it, and connectivity that's coming through technology. Now that connectivity is, I think, through machines. What happens when human connectivity reduces? And has there been any research on what impact it will have on the mental issues that it will create? Because it will create loneliness, not just within the family, but socially. You're talking to a machine when you're taking money out, you're talking to a machine when, or just going to the computer, booking a flight, etc. So has there any research been done, and what do you think will happen to the mental abilities of people? And if I may stretch this question a little, although I know you spoke about it, machines don't have emotions, but a lot has been said about IQ and EQ. Is there any chance that machines will be given EQ, or AI will be given EQ at some point?
I can take a bit of a crack at that.
Professor Singer, if you're still around, would you like to answer that question? It's a profound one, merits a response from you.
I am around, although Dr. Naweed also suggested that he could take it back, and he may well have more expertise than I do. I have to disagree with the remarks that machines will never be able to be generally intelligent. The survey that I mentioned was done of people working in this field, and a substantial number of them, as I said, thought that by somewhere around 2040 or 2060 that would be possible. So will they have EQ as well as IQ? Look, we could program that in, I suppose, if we wanted to. And then the question, that's a little bit like programming in values. But I don't rule out at some stage that machines will be conscious and will have EQ. I'm not sure about the comment about loneliness. I think that actually the connectivity does reduce loneliness in some respect. That you have this larger group of people that you can connect to and be friends, and not just Facebook friends, but develop real friendships. So I'm not so worried about that aspect. But Mr. Naweed maybe would like to comment as well.
Yes, I've seen research, I think I would agree with Dr. Singer saying that actually in most empirical research being done, and this was done primarily in the US and it was done with the elderly, where they generally live in facilities or apartments by themselves away from their families, and they generally found that getting over the initial hump of using technologies generally does reduce loneliness in their lives, and they feel more connected to their families and loved ones when they don't physically live with them anymore. Ironically, the more mental health issues have resulted from people who are hyper-connected to social media, teens who have large amounts of fan followings, and YouTube stars who have over 1 million and 1.5 million subscribers. They are really at a higher risk of mental illness and not being able to, and being very, very attached to the opinions of their fans, who are often strangers on the internet, and having an overwhelmingly large psychological locus of control, where their entire sense of self is derived from the opinions and viewpoints of not one or two individuals or their close family members, but rather a collective, which leads to a lot of emotional dysfunction. So hyperconnectivity is a greater threat to mental health than the risk of isolation or mental illness as a result of technology use is significantly reduced.
Very good. So with that, we want to conclude the session. I do want to quote one example of social media that is often overlooked, because there's so much discussion about somehow trying to regulate social media. Now, my favorite example of social media is Wikipedia. It's not regulated. It's born out of entirely people wanting to correct other people about facts that they know better. And from that has emerged the world's largest encyclopedia, which is more accurate than any other source of information. So I don't know whether we want to regulate social media or let people just regulate it themselves, because Wikipedia is a great example of that. And you may want to map that to more popular choices like Twitters and Facebooks, etc. Something will emerge out of that. But there is certainly precedence and example of at least the most accurate source of information that humans know of, kind of self-regulating itself, which is Wikipedia. With those comments, thank you so much for your time, and to all the august speakers who joined us today.
I thank our panelists for bringing us such an engaging discourse, although I have to say I still have a lot of questions. This is just such an interesting forum. With that being said, I will request our moderator for the day, Dr. Umar Saif, to present the shields to our panelists that are present here with us. Mr. Suhail Ahmed, if you could receive your memento. Dr. Hussain Nadeem, please.